You know, he picked the wrong family, and not scared of a conflict, and we're not scared. We're not running. We're coming at him.
I don't know what was going on there. Okay. I'm just going to try something, okay?
You know, he picked the wrong family, and not scared of a conflict, and we're not scared. We're not running. We're coming at him.
I just wanted to try that out. Thanks for having patience. I don't know what I think of this so far because I haven't been able to get my intro or my outro going. So I'm liking the stream for the most part, but I think we're having technical issues. Or is it just... See if I can get this going, friends. The way it's supposed to be. I'm just not figuring this out. It's frozen on this side. I hope this does not mean that I'm not going to be able to use this platform because I like it. Okay. Can you guys hear everything okay at least? Because it's kicked me off the stream as far as... Damn. Yeah, it's done that again. try to join. Well, it's bringing up my name, but it's not bringing up my picture. What the hell? Come on. Hide me? Show me. Why is it showing? What the hell? Are we all having technical difficulties? I don't know where they all went. I might end up, well, I'm probably going to have to jump off in about an hour. And tomorrow afternoon, dentist appointment. How the hell do I get this thing going? Still waiting on them. They came on for a second and then gone for a second. Let's see. Just make sure. Nothing yet. So it did show me for like a second to add a guest. No. Okay, fingers crossed. Let's see if this works. It's being sketchy.
Before I forget, if we have some time at the end of the day, I want to talk about Wednesday in the event we have to flex start time.
Yeah.
I think tomorrow's fine. I think Wednesday is the issue.
You're right.
All rise for the jury, please.
Just walked up and down. Got warm.
Thank you. May all be seated. Court will recall 20 CR 1358, People versus Letecia. It should reflect the jury has returned to the courtroom. Prosecution, call your next witness.
Your Honor, people call Sherry Holes to the stand.
Ms. Holes, if you would step forward and raise your right hand, please, ma'am. You swear or affirm the testimony about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Go ahead and have a seat in the witness stand. Please watch your step as you step into the stand.
I don't know, guys.
Good afternoon, Ms. Holes. How are you doing?
Good afternoon.
Could you please introduce yourself to the jury and spell your first and last name?
Yes, my name is Sherry Holes. It's Sherrie, last of Holes, Holes.
And what is your occupation?
I'm currently employed as a forensic serologist and DNA analyst at the Colorado Springs Metro Crime Lab.
And how long have you been employed such as?
I've been employed in that role approximately 4.5 years at the CSPD Crime Lab.
And what does a forensic serologist
Stop you
do?
for just a moment.
Oh, sure.
Can you move that so that it's on its side so it doesn't block the view of those two jurors right there?
Oh, let me just put it right here.
Or you can just lay it down on its side. Either one. Okay.
We'll just do that.
All right, go ahead.
I think I was asking you what a forensic serologist does.
Yes, a forensic serologist examines evidence for the presence of biological fluids. Specifically in our lab, we look for blood, semen, saliva, and also we examine for other potential biological evidence that may be suitable for DNA analysis.
And what kind of experience of training? Do you have in the field of forensic serology?
Well, my training, first of all, I have a Bachelor of Science degree in Biological Sciences from University of California at Davis. I also have a Master's of Public Health with a specialty in Forensic Science from University of California, Berkeley. Prior to my employment in Colorado, I was employed in the same capacity for approximately 10 years. I was also a forensic DNA analyst and serologist in various crime labs in California. Most serology training actually does occur on the job. There are a few formal classes that I did take, such as microscopy of semen evidence, and mostly it was on the job training. In fact, when I came to Colorado Springs and was hired here, I spent about a year just going through a training protocol before I was deemed competent and able to begin casework.
And are you peer reviewed when you do a serology examination?
Yeah, so all the reports that I write with my results are always technically reviewed by a second qualified analyst within the lab to make sure that they agree with the conclusions that I'm offering in the report. And then there's also another level of review called administrative review before the report goes out by another second qualified analyst, serology and DNA analyst.
And approximately how many forensic serology examinations have you conducted in your career?
Oh, in my career, it's well over 1,000.
You don't keep track each time you do one and say,
I usually average about 100 cases for serology a year. So over the course of almost 15 years, yeah, it's well over 1,000.
that was a bad attempt to try. I'm sorry. Have you testified as an expert in the field of forensic serology in the past?
Yes, I have.
Approximately how many times?
I've been qualified as an expert in this area approximately 40 times previously.
And are those both here and in California?
That's correct.
At this time, we'd ask the court qualify Ms. Holes as an expert in the field of forensic serology and allow her to render opinion in that field.
Defense?
No objection to her being qualified.
Witness will be qualified. Go ahead.
So I want to kind of focus on your role as a forensic serologist here in Colorado Springs Metro Crime Lab. Were you asked to conduct several forensic serological examinations?
Serological, correct, yeah.
In this particular case, the disappearance of Gannon Stauch.
Yes, I was.
Could you give the jury a rundown on how you come about or how you became involved in this investigation?
So when we get a request from an agency, in this case, the El Paso County Sheriff's Office, typically there's a couple of things that happen. One is they will write a cover letter with a description of the pertinent details and some of the items of evidence that they would like examined. And then also typically there's a meeting between the submitting agency and our crime lab supervisor, our DNA technical supervisor, and they make decisions as to these are the items that we will accept and which what are the priorities on which items will be tested.
And so is that common in any criminal investigation that the investigating agency will submit a letter asking you to perform analysis on certain items of evidence?
I can't speak to how other laboratories and agencies do it, but that is what we request, just so that we have some background knowledge of, it helps us decide of the case, so that helps us decide which evidence are best going to answer the questions being posed in the case and what is most probative, in other words, offering proof in the case circumstances.
And is it often in large investigations that you may actually meet with the detectives or other investigative officers to talk about what should be tested and why and that kind of thing?
Yes, definitely they try to do meetings before the first request comes in, but often in a large investigation, there can be several meetings that occur over time as more investigative details come to light or more questions are being answered in the case. And that is what happened in this particular case.
Can you describe that for the jury? Why did that happen in this particular case?
I was not involved in the actual meetings that were occurring. That was our crime lab manager and the DNA supervisor. But from my understanding, as more information was coming to light in the course of the investigation, more questions were being asked, more evidence was being collected on multiple different occasions, which then was coming into the lab with a request for examination.
And when you conduct your examinations, how do you get your results back to the investigating agency?
So once we have, and when I have issued a report and it's gone through the 2 layers of review, it is then released to the investigating detective, the lead detective on the case from one of our administrative staff.
And you do several reports with regards to this investigation.
Yes, in this particular investigation, I released 7 reports.
And do you know why there were 7 different reports on, I'm assuming, 7 different dates?
Again, I think additional items were being collected, additional questions were being asked as additional evidence was being collected and during the course of the investigation. So they didn't have all of the evidence or even all of the information from that very first request. So again, as they were having more meetings with our lab management, it was decisions were being made that we need additional items tested.
And so what would be your role, just so you can explain to the jury, in the process of doing your analysis with regards to evidence in this particular case?
My role was to examine the items of evidence for the presence of mostly the presence of blood, and then also for other potential biological material that may be there, and consolidate any swabs or cuttings that I take, as well as documentation of the evidence. Documentation is done through photography and from note-taking of my observations of the evidence. And then any samples that I deem would be suitable to go on for DNA analysis, I'm then consolidating into what we call a DNA packet. DNA packet is just an envelope that has numerous tubes that I've prepared. The tubes have little pieces of cuttings or little swabs from the various items of evidence. Then that will go forward to the next step, which is the DNA analysis.
And with regards to this particular investigation, you indicated earlier that you may have been looking for blood or the presumptive presence of blood in these types of items. How would that impact your DNA packet, or whether or not you create a DNA packet with regards to what the results of your blood test was?
So when I am looking for blood, that's always starts with a visual exam. If I see staining that is consistent with visually looks like blood, we then do a chemical color test. It's a presumptive test for blood, meaning it's not a confirmatory test for blood, but it does indicate the presence of that. If I have a stain area that looks like blood, reacts to that chemical presumptive test, I typically will take a small cutting or a swabbing of that stain, trying to preserve additional stain, not take the whole sample when I can. And then that would go into a test tube. That test tube then goes into the DNA packet. I also do what we call trace swabbing, and trace swabbing is areas that may contain DNA cells or cells that have DNA. So many of our tests are so sensitive now in DNA analysis that we don't actually need to have a stain present. We can also get a DNA profile from just a very small number of just cells. Cells can be deposited just through touch or from wearing clothing, that kind of thing. So some of my serology examination is also doing trace swabbing. So areas in which I don't actually see a stain, but may be interested in DNA results from maybe through someone having touched an item per se.
Okay. And we'll get to those as we go through the individual items. Did you have several individual physical pieces of evidence that you examined and performed a serological examination on those items?
Yes, I did.
And would you also receive swabs from various areas of a residence 6627 Mandan Drive here in Colorado Springs?
Yes, I did.
And would you, when you received all these items, were they all sealed in a protective way so that you know
Yes. This is labeled as the toothbrush belonging to Gannon Stauch.
and do you need to open that to see that that's the toothbrush in there?
I can see it from the bottom. It's been partially opened.
Okay. And when you received that, was it sealed, of course?
Yes, it was.
What did you do with that particular toothbrush?
This toothbrush was submitted as a possible secondary reference standard when we need to make DNA comparisons. We need a reference standard or a known sample from an individual. This was submitted as a possible secondary reference. Gannon was not present at the time, so they have a toothbrush, which hopefully would have his DNA on it. So I did some swabbing of the toothbrush. I also took some cuttings of the toothbrush bristles as well.
And was that done on February 8th of 2020?
The report was issued on February 8th, that work, yes.
It says that the request date was February 5th, 2020. So did you do the actual testing sometime in between those two dates?
Yes,
So Gannon's body had not been discovered yet.
correct.
So you created a DNA packet for this item?
Not just for this item, but yes, this would be one of the items, those little cuttings of the toothbrush bristles and the swabs, those would go into test tubes and be included in a DNA packet with other samples that I collected.
Now, earlier you testified that you're also a forensic DNA analyst. Is there a reason why you didn't do DNA on this particular item versus creating a packet and sending it on?
Yeah, at this point in time, I was not a qualified DNA analyst at the lab here in Colorado Springs. So my only role was to do serology examinations.
So now you can do both, right?
I'm to a certain point in my DNA analysis training that I am qualified to up to a certain step, but there's always more training to be done.
Did this item and other items go on to Donna Minogue for further DNA testing?
Yes.
And I don't know if we want to just stick that back in
Oh,
the
sure.
box, just that so it doesn't get cluttered up there. Or that works too. Okay. The next item in there is People's Exhibit 184. You could pull that out and tell us what that is.
Yes, DNA standards for Gannon's biological father.
And you need to open that to see what's in there.
It's partially open. There's, I can take a look at this. Okay, there's just some swabs that are in here.
Are those buccal swabs from Mr. Eugene Stauch, also Al Stauch?
Yes, buccal swabs are swabs that are taken from the inside of the cheeks and the gum area, and those are taken as a reference standard or a known DNA standard that will be later on used for comparison purposes.
And I guess we're doing that. Let's pull out 185 as well. What is People's Exhibit 185?
DNA standards for Gannon's biological mother, Landon. Okay. Yes, this also contains 2 sets of swabs.
And so those buccal swabs as well from Gannon's mother?
Yes, these are buccal swabs also collected as reference standards from Gannon's mother.
Now, we're doing this together, but I'm assuming when you conduct the test, you're doing things individually, right? You're not mixing and matching items of evidence?
So we have yes, that's correct. We have a very set process on how we examine items of evidence in the lab. We always, before we even start any examination, we do a thorough cleaning of our workspace using bleach. We know that DNA, because it's so sensitive, our testing procedures are so sensitive, they are prone to contamination. So we have to be very careful, make sure we don't leave our own DNA on any evidence. So that involves wearing protective face coverings and hand coverings and gloves, hair coverings as well. And then we also want to make sure that there's no contaminating DNA on our work surfaces. So those are always bleached down in between every single item of evidence. We always lay out a fresh piece of like white butcher paper, so the evidence actually doesn't even touch any of our work surfaces. Any of our implements are cleaned as well. And then we always look at the order in which we look at items of evidence is also important. We try to look at evidence items that may have potentially low amounts of DNA before we would look at evidence items that have high amounts of DNA, something that would be very bloody, would have an expected high amount of DNA. We wouldn't want that to contaminate our work surfaces at all. So the order in which we examine is important. And then lastly, we always look at reference samples last, after looking at all the other evidence items.
And with regards to People's Exhibit 184 and 185, what did you do exactly to create a DNA packet for those 2 buccal swabs?
So the buccal swabs, individually, of course, one by one, examining those. My role was just to take a portion of one of the buccal swabs. I essentially just, it's like a long Q-tip, like a Q-tip head with a long stick. That's what the swab is. And I just take a sterile scalpel and I just portion off one part of the swab. That goes into a sterile tube, which is then labeled with the associated barcode number that we've given it. Then that tube is that I've created goes into the DNA packet.
I'm referencing your February 8th, 2020 report, if you need to refresh your recollection, but do you recall looking at a piece of tan carpet that was rolled up inside of another piece of carpet that was found in the storage room at 6627 Mandan Drive?
Yes.
And what were you looking at in regards to that carpet?
So I was looking for the possible presence of blood.
Did you see with your eye the presence of possible blood?
I did.
And what did you do upon seeing that?
So once I visually see staining that looks like it may be blood, I then do the chemical color presumptive test, which was positive for the presence of blood on the carpet. And then I do, actually on the back of that rolled up piece of carpet, I then swabbed a portion of that potential blood staining so that portion of that swab can go in the test tube and then into the DNA packet for further analysis.
And do you have People's Exhibit 386 there
I do.
next in list?
Yes.
What is People's Exhibit 386?
Let's see. This is 3 sets of possible blood swabs.
And what are those blood swabs from? Does it indicate on the
It
envelope?
does, yes. These were identified using placards A, B, and C, collected from the stairs and the floor of the garage.
And so, what are these? Are these Q-tips or am I being too general here?
It's very much like a Q-tip. Their swabs come in sterile packaging. So typically there's a sterile wrapper, and within there are 2 swabs that they are when our crime scene investigators are collecting these, they would open up the sterile packaging, take out these 2 swabs, which look like a Q-tip, but they have long wooden sticks. And then once they're finished swabbing these particular areas, they go back into the individual swab wrappers, and that's how I receive them. This one has 3 sets, meaning there'd be 3 separate collections then contained within this outer envelope.
Are the 3 sets labeled in a particular way?
I might need to refer to my notes. Let's see.
Now, page 2 to 4 of your
Okay.
report.
Is that on my report or my notes?
It's in your report.
Okay, I'm just gonna look at my notes. Okay, let's see. Okay, so they actually, inside the outer envelope, inside there was 3 smaller tape seal manila envelopes. And each of those were labeled with either an A or a B or a C to indicate the placards that they had used during while they were collecting the evidence.
And does it say where these placards were located within the residence?
Let's see.
Was it in the garage? I'm just,
Yeah, so the outermost barcode label, which they put on here, says from the stairs and the floor of the garage.
so with regards to these placards, if the jury wanted to, they can look at photographs and go to the garage and look for placards A, B, and C, and that would reference the swabs that we're talking about?
Yes, correct.
So what did you find with regards to placards A, B, and C, or at least the swabs from those areas in the garage?
So each of those swabs did show kind of a reddish discoloration, each set, A, B, and C. And I did my chemical presumptive testing for each set of placards A, B, C, and all were presumptive positive for blood.
And did those get forwarded on for DNA analysis?
Yes, portions of those swabs were then cut and placed into test tubes, forwarded for DNA analysis.
Okay. I believe the next one, the Honorable may have permission to look for an exhibit.
Might have to narrow it down a little bit more than that. That's okay.
People's 451 is what I'm looking for.
Okay.
Show you people's this admitted evidence 451. Do you recognize this item?
I do.
Okay. Do you need to look at that further?
Okay, I do, yes.
Okay. Obviously 451 is a piece of carpet, right?
Yes, that was a carpet, correct. Carpet 1 is how they designated that one.
So now while I'm up here. What did you find in people's exhibit 451?
That piece of carpet, there was staining observed on both sides of the carpet that was presumptive positive for blood.
And did you forward that on for DNA analysis?
I did, yes. Or not the whole carpet. I did take samples from the carpet.
Now, People's Exhibit 503, in your report, it's labeled as 6839 SW2-01, period 01. Another piece of carpet. Do you recall seeing that?
So let's see. Carpet 1 is that item number that you just described. There was a second carpet 2, that was 6839 SW2-04.01. Is it a different exhibit that you're referencing?
Yeah, I think 451 was a different one. So let me show you that again so you can look at the lab number.
Okay. So Okay, so that's the -01. That's for carpet 1,
Okay.
right? Okay.
Is the next one carpet 2 then?
The next one should be carpet 2.
So same thing with carpet 2. What did you find on carpet 2, which is People's Exhibit 503?
Yes. Carpet 2 also had visible staining and also reacted positive to the presumptive test for blood.
Did you also look at the foam padding associated with People's Exhibit 503?
Yes, I did.
And what did you find in the foam padding of People's Exhibit 503?
Also, foam padding had visible staining and was positive for the presumptive presence of blood.
The next exhibit in the box to your right should be People's Exhibit 512. Can you pull that out?
Yes.
What do you see in People's Exhibit 512?
This one is labeled as the electrical outlet cover with possible blood. And it says collected from southeast corner of southeast room, child room of basement.
And what did you find after, did you conduct a presumptive test for blood on that item?
I did. I noted some visible staining on the electric outlet cover. I did the presumptive test for blood, which was positive.
And did you perform a DNA kit for that item?
Well, I did do some swabbing of the stained area that could then go on for DNA analysis, yes.
And so do you do that, for instance, if it's a physical piece of item that may have blood on it, would you actually swab the blood versus a CSI at the scene swabbing like the garage floor that we already talked about?
Yeah, typically when we train CSIs or law enforcement officers, we always suggest that if they can collect the item and bring it into the lab so the serologist can examine it, that's the best practice. If it's an item that is just not movable, such as a garage floor or just too unwieldy to collect, then they do some sampling as well. But we always prefer on anything that can be packaged and brought into the lab, we always would prefer to examine it ourselves and do all of the documentation and collection in the lab.
Is the swabbing the same process though? Same, keep referring to it as a Q-tip. Is there something else I should refer it to?
Yeah, swab or Q-tip, it's the same. We always have these, so we use the sterile package swabs that we open up, and then I label the swab wrapper as to what I'm going to be, what the barcode number is associated with it, and I swab it, I let it dry. Once it's dry, I can then take a portion of the swab, put it into a sterile test tube for DNA analysis.
We can put that back, and then the next item should be People's Exhibit 516. That,
Yes.
and what is People's Exhibit 516?
This is labeled as possible blood swabs collected from electrical socket in southeast corner of southeast room, child room of basement.
And you know if that socket is related to People's Exhibit 512, the item we just looked at?
Yes, I believe that they did actually, I'm not sure who actually collected the swab, but that it was swabbed prior to being collected and submitted to the lab.
And what did you do with that particular exhibit?
This particular exhibit, I just noted some coloration on the swab, and then let's see, tested it with the presumptive test for blood, which was positive. I then took a portion of the swab, cut portion of the swab, put it into the test tube for DNA analysis.
The next time I want to talk to you about is in your report, it's People's Exhibit 504, but in your report you label as Carpet 2. Does that refresh your recollection a little bit about the 3 different carpets you looked at?
Okay, yes. So there was a carpet 1, there was a carpet 2, and then there was an unlabeled carpet rug. So,
Right.
Okay,
Right.
yes.
So what did you find with regards to People's Exhibit 504, what you have labeled as Carpet 2 in your report?
Again, visible staining was present on the carpet. The chemical presumptive test for blood was positive.
And did you forward that on for DNA analysis?
Yes, samples were taken on carpet 2 from the back side of the carpet. Swabs were taken, cuttings were taken, and even some of the stained fibers were taken, all to be forwarded for DNA analysis.
Did you do the same for the padding that was related to Carpet 2, People's Exhibit 504?
Same process, did a visual exam, noted staining, which was presumptive positive for blood. And again, took a small cutting of the stained area that could be forwarded for DNA analysis.
And with regards to carpet 1 and carpet 2, do you know where this carpet came from with regards to 6627 Mandan Drive?
They were labeled as coming from the southeast room, also known as the child's room in the basement.
That been Gannon's room, or did you know?
That's my understanding, that they were from Gannon's room.
Was it your understanding that there was a large area of blood in the corner of his room underneath his bed?
Yes.
I now want to turn to your February 28th, 2020 report. I believe the next item in the box will be People's Exhibit 371. Is that right?
That's 378.
Do you see 371 up there? Oh, I apologize. 371 is defendant's buccal swabs. Do you recall getting defendant's buccal swabs?
Let's see. Were they part of a kit? Let me take a
Well,
look.
they're currently admitted into evidence, but they're in a freezer somewhere.
So I did actually get buccal swabs. They were part of an evidence collection kit taken from Letecia Stauch, which had fingernail scrapings and a buccal swab. So I did portion out some of the buccal swab from Letecia Stauch for DNA analysis.
Okay, and that went on to Donna Minogue's analysis.
Correct, yes.
All right. So now let's go to the shoes that you have there. People's Exhibit 378. Are those the shoes you looked at?
Yes, they are.
Is that People's Exhibit 378?
Correct, yes.
Now, earlier you testified about swabbing for DNA for the presence of things that are other than blood. Did you do that with this particular item?
Yes, I did. Again, we call that trace DNA swabbing. It's in areas that we don't see staining, but we may be interested in any, say, skin cells that may be left by, in these cases, shoes, maybe someone who wore the shoes. We could potentially still get DNA from swabbing, in this case, the inside soles of the shoes.
And so can you demonstrate, I know the shoes are in plastic, but can you kind of demonstrate to the jury where you swab these particular shoes in the hopes of finding DNA for the owner of those shoes?
Sure. So for the owner, I would expect that their DNA would be on the inside soles. So I actually, for each shoe individually, these are separate swabbings. I took the swabs together and I swabbed the insole, like reaching into the shoe, and then also the back heel area. And that was done separately for the right and left shoes.
And did that get forwarded on for DNA analysis?
Yes, it did.
Did you also swab any potential blood on the outside of those shoes?
Yes. On the right shoe, I did swab. It did react. The right shoe did react to the chemical presumptive test for blood on the outsole. So on the bottom of the shoe. So I actually just swabbed the entire outsole, including all of the recessed areas of the shoe as well.
Now, when you got these shoes, were you able to visibly see blood on them or what appeared to be blood?
So I did note that they had kind of an orangish, reddish coloration. I didn't, sometimes things can look like blood and they don't react, and other times, the blood potentially can take different colorations. Both shoes had that coloration, although the left shoe did not react to the presumptive presence of blood. So unclear if the coloration is due to potential blood staining, but the right shoe did react to the presumptive test for blood.
And what happens to blood if you put shoes in a washing machine and run the wash?
So what happens to blood? So blood obviously is going to, for the most part, be washed off, but within blood there are cells. And cells can sometimes survive washing. We do know through actual studies that have been published that some DNA can survive washing. Of course, some would be lost to the wash process, but depending on various factors such as what type of substrate or surface the DNA was deposited on, what type of wash cycle, what type of detergents, or even if bleaches were used, those are all going to impact whether or not we would get recoverable amounts of DNA from something that has gone through the wash.
When you received these shoes, did you notice anything that was consistent with them being run through a washing machine?
I actually did note for these shoes that they had a strong, what I call clean odor.
And yet you still saw some discoloration that appeared to be blood to you on these shoes?
I did note discoloration on the soles of the shoe, the outsoles, and that's where I focused my attention as far as presumptive testing for blood, and was able to find positive results on the outsole of the right shoe.
Did you also receive a swab with regards to this case, which is People's Exhibit 246? Should be in that box there.
Let's see.
If it's not in that box, I can just ask you
I
about it.
actually found it. Yes. Okay.
Okay. What is People's Exhibit 246?
This is labeled as package of 2 swabs from woman's black and white Nike shoe. And then there's some indications on the bottom, handwritten, swabs from Nike shoes, laundry room, right shoe.
And so are those consistent with People's Exhibit 378, the Nike shoes that you just talked about?
Yeah, they actually were swabbed prior to being submitted into the lab. The outsole was swabbed.
And did you submit that on to DNA analysis?
I did this, I believe I actually tested it for the presumptive presence of blood. I did, and that was positive. So yes, and then a portion was submitted on for DNA analysis.
Need help getting rid of some of those
No,
exhibits? or
I
you-
got it.
Next want to go to People's Exhibit. Well, before we leave 378, did you talk about all the areas you swabbed, both outside and inside of the shoe?
Let me just refer to my report. Okay, so the right shoe, I did swab the entire outsole of the right shoe that had reacted positive for the presumptive presence of blood, even in all of those little recessed areas as well. I did swab the right shoelace as well. And then I took the trace swabs that we talked about for wearer DNA on the inside sole and the inside back heel area. The left shoe, I did not get any presumptive positives. They were all negatives. So I only did those trace swabs on the insole of the left shoe.
And were those individually packaged for DNA analysis? So when Donna Minogue did her DNA analysis, she knew exactly what she was doing based on your labeling.
Yes, I always label the swab wrappers with what I'm collecting. And then also the test tubes get the same itemization as well.
And does that apply to everything where you create a DNA packet? Do you label it so Donna Minogue, who does the DNA analysis, can then say, this is the item that Sherry Holes looked at?
Yes, that's our standard practice within the lab.
Next, I want to turn to People's Exhibit 459. Do you have that there?
I do.
What is People's Exhibit 459?
This is labeled as swabs of Blue Star presumptive positive reactions in garage and laundry room of 6627 Mandan Drive.
So what is the Blue Star? I know the jury has heard a lot about Blue Star, but what does Blue Star mean to you, and how do you treat that differently? For instance, a swab that says blood on the garage floor is A, B, and C said.
Sure. So Blue Star is another chemical presumptive test. It works in very much the same way as the chemical test I'm using in the lab. I use a different one, but it has the same process. Blue Star is used by our CSIs out at crime scenes, and it's typically used in areas in which they suspect there might be blood, or they're looking to see if there's blood, but it's really not visible to them. And they can spray this reagent onto an area. It will react. It's very, very sensitive. It will react even if an area has been cleaned potentially. So it's a chemiluminescent. Usually that's something that they do in a darkened room, and it's much like luminol. It glows, and they can take photographs of areas that are reacting. When they find a Blue Star positive area, then they swab it for us and they submit it into the lab. But because it's already gone through a chemical presumptive test. I don't need to now repeat another chemical presumptive test. It's already reacted positive to the blue star. It's the same process that my test would do. So when I get something labeled as blue star positive, my role is typically just to, like in this case, these are swabs, just go ahead and collect a portion of the swab into a test tube and forward it on for DNA analysis.
And is that what you did with 459?
Yes.
And did you do that with everything that was labeled blue star, at least swabbing of the blue star?
When things were swabbed, yes, there were a few items, larger items that said blue star positive that I did still, like carpeting. I did still do a visual exam, but swabs, I just took a portion. I didn't do further chemical presumptive testing.
So with regards to People's Exhibit 518, which should be the next exhibit, did you do the same things with that particular item?
Yes, this is labeled swabs of blue star positive reactions from the staircase between the main level and basement of 6627 Mandan Drive. Again, my role was just to take a sample using a scalpel, take off a small portion of the swabs, put them into the test tubes.
Is that 518 you're looking at?
Yes.
And so let me, if I can approach her.
You may.
Sure.
Let's now jump to your March 17th, 2020 report. And I'm going to hand you what's been admitted into evidence as People's Exhibit 423.
Yes.
I can just hold it for you if you like.
Okay.
Do
Yes.
you recognize that?
I do recognize the label on it. I did not package it in this packaging, but yes, I recognize this is a plastic tub and lid with possible blood.
Did you examine this item?
I did.
Do you need to open it to look at it?
No, I don't.
Do you need me to open it?
No.
All right. What did you do with People's Exhibit 423?
This item was examined for the possible presence of blood, so I did do some visual examinations. That's how we always start all of our serology. And I did note that there was some red-brown staining on one short end of this plastic tub, on the tub and on the lid.